Yes, welcome back to the Magic Sponge podcast, miracle cure for all your rugby league injury issues. I'm Brien, I'm the guy behind NRL Physio, everything you see on socials. My co-host James, he's a physio, he's a big footy nuffy, he is also here. Look, James, I was a bit concerned today. Origin Daine decided, I think he must have heard sort of pre-game that Murray Taulagi was struggling. They flicked the switch from Newcastle Daine to Origin Daine. Origin Daine came out and had a whale of a game for Newcastle today. And while I was excited as a Queenslander, I was like, far out, Origin Daine in the team. That could almost make us favourites. I think that was quite concerning. But then just before we jumped on the pod, we've now discovered that Billy has decided to not pick David Fifita in what was probably the most obvious position to pick David Fifita. And we've got Curdy Capes starting in the second row and Felice Kafusi as one of our only two middle forwards off the bench. So welcome to the show, mate. And I'm almost without speech.
Yeah, it's hard to do the company line of "in Billy we trust" when you see the team that gets selected, Brian. Like, I know we say that ad nauseum. We G it up for weeks before Origin starts. We G it up during Origin, and obviously we will probably keep trying to G it up, but it just doesn't have that same level of enthusiasm or sincerity, does it, when you have a look at things? I don't understand it, Brian. We were talking off air. It sort of is eerily similar to long tenured coaches, like even when you think about Freddie Fittler, he started doing random stuff like this where the team selections were just downright bizarre into the tenure there. And I don't know if it's overthink, I don't know if it's groupthink, I don't know if there's any thinking at all, because the fact that we're going to be rolling out with what we're rolling out, and it's great for fantasy purposes because Fafita's going to be around 19 number, but my goodness, you can't tell me that he's not in our top 17 worth of players. I don't really understand it. I think if he was selected with the rest of our team, we'll be rip-roaring favourites, and that's probably all good. I'd be happy to G that up and wear that. But as it stands at the moment, I think we're going to claim underdog tags again because the selection has probably let us down. I know New South Wales are going to be missing Latrell, but they've still made some good selections. Just some pretty stock standard choices there, wasn't it, Brian? Didn't overthink the room, just thought, okay, well, who's a like-for-like replacement? Who's playing pretty good? Who's done it before? Oh, we'll take that person in here. No such thing for Queensland. So who the hell knows how this is going to shake out for us? If we lose game 3, this may well be considered the greatest rugby league beg shit since 1908, for all we know, Brian. I am immensely apprehensive, but I want to just keep saying to myself and Billy, we trust. It's getting harder to do, though, at the moment. God, it's getting harder. It might blow up and it might work out for us, but oh boy, bit worrying for the guys in maroon coming up to Suncorp on our home patch.
Mate, as a avid Dolphins fan, you won't find a guy who loves Finn Diesel, Felice Kafusi, more than me. But as a guy who played 11 minutes in game 2 while Ruben Cotter was off for HIA, to see him picked again over some other guys, yeah, man, like just mind-boggling. Absolutely mind-boggling. But as you say, benefits are just solidified our underdog status again. So we're going into our home patch as rank outsiders, which is, like good to see. Always love that. And I think it's going to make game 3 very interesting. But look, let's move past that. We won't move past it anytime soon, but let's move past it for the purposes of the show. Guys, the best rugby league fantasy comp is here again. Bundy, the NRL, and the NRLW are back with the world's first mixed gender fantasy league, the Bundy Mixer. I know many of you consider yourselves high-level fantasy players. Well, this is going to really test your skill with the stars of the women's game able to be selected alongside the men. It's a really great way to elevate the women's game. As we know, fantasy sports drives a significant amount of interest in rugby league, and with the rapid growth of the NRLW, it's the perfect combo. Plus, it really is super easy to play. You only have to pick 6 players each week, 3 guys and 3 girls, and there's no salary caps, which is very convenient. James and I consider ourselves pretty gun fantasy players and big fans of the women's game. So head to mixer.nrl.com to take us on and enter the special league code for Magic Sponge listeners, which is XZMGRY I9, or head to the link in the podcast description. Probably easier to head to the podcast description link or hit any of my socials and you'll see the links up there. There's plenty of prizes to be run. Big prize at the end of the season, but also weekly prizes as well, which is really cool. James, we consider ourselves not only NRL experts, but we love our NRLW, and especially around the fantasy side of things. So I'm pretty keen for this to be back.
It's always a ripper, Brian. We had a super enjoyable time with it last year. I think I've already put my team hat into the ring here, so I've just gone under the guise of the tinfoil enthusiast. So I'm going to really lean into the conspiracies, but there's nothing conspiracy related about the NRLW, Brian. I froth it. I love it. I get around it. We just run the 3-game Origin series in the NRLW. What's not to like? There's a lot of new players sort of getting a shot with the expanding comp. So I think the NRLW is going to be more and more exciting as the year goes on. I can't wait for the Bundy Mix and Make. Support them. They support us on the Magic Sponge. Get around it.
Love it, guys. So as always, we're on YouTube now. Please head on over there, subscribe, review, thumbs up. We're also streaming on demand at rugbyleague.com. So if you want to hit us up on there, head over and check out the site that Steve Mascord and the guys have got going on there. Look, this is your one-stop shop for all things injury analysis in the NRL. You know why you're here. We're going to talk about the injuries, talk about how it relates to fantasy and Supercoach. If you like what you hear, patreon.com/NRL Physio. But otherwise, let's get to the injuries from round 18.
I don't know exactly what he's done. I would have thought it was an ankle, but I'm just guessing. He shouldn't be out for a long period of time. I'm no doctor. We have to wait for the scans, obviously, but that'd be more positive than negative.
Round 18's done, Brian. We're going to start with the HIAs from this week. So Dallin, Watene, Zelezniak, and Victor Radley obviously have the bye next week. They'll still enter the protocols, but they'll be at least, at earliest lining up in round 20 if they get through them all right. Ben Trbojevic was one out of this week. Manly do play next week, so he's probably going to miss round 19 at least. Do you want to touch on them in any more detail, Brian, those 3 names?
Yeah, I think it's just worth noting for anybody who is hoping that the Sea Eagles might be able to apply for an exemption with Benny Turbo, is that Seabold said in post-match presser that Benny Turbo would miss next week. So that's a bit of a hit for anyone sort of relying on him. And then the only other one worth mentioning, as I said on socials, Victor Radley, it's his 5th concussion in the last 3 seasons, or 5th failed HIA, if you want to get technical. So a bit down the line of, we've seen Alex Twal, my good friend, personal confidant, Alex Twal, now missing for multiple weeks after his is obviously a lot more condensed, 6 concussions in 2 seasons. But yeah, just as the concussions start to build up in number, there's more chance for an extended recovery time. So worth keeping an eye on for Victor.
Very good shout there, Brian. Eels v Bunnies was first on the slate here. So we've got Latrell Mitchell and Junior Paulo as lisfranc injuries. We don't know specifically about Latrell yet, though, do we, Brian? We'll wait until Tuesday until we know how long he's facing, most likely, yeah?
Yeah, mate. So with this, had a lot of people asking, like, how do they not know yet? They've had the scans, those kind of things. With lisfranc injuries can go hand in hand with many different joint and ligament injuries here. It's not always sort of super straightforward, especially when you're dealing with like partial tears. And the lisfranc ligament injury or ligament complex, I mean, you're talking about one ligament in the midfoot, sort of at the base of the first and second toes there. If you trace it up, up into your midfoot, but it's not always just damage of that particular ligament. It often is used as an umbrella term to talk about sort of damage anywhere throughout that midfoot as well. So you can have like one ligament tear, you can have multiple. Thankfully, he's avoided a fracture. When there's a partial tear, it's like, okay, do we put him in a boot? Can he come back in 3 to 4 weeks? Is it torn too much where we need to surgically replace it? We talk about this a lot all the time, actually, with those partial ACL tears, right? Where a ligament can be torn, 10% and the joint can be unstable, so you need surgery. It can be torn 90% and be fine and you don't need surgery. And it's a similar sort of thing here. So he's going to go and see the surgeon on Tuesday, get them to review it and see. Now, leaving it till Tuesday, they're probably waiting for some swelling and stuff to settle down so that more accurate sort of assessment of the foot overall can be performed in person by the specialist as well. because there's no real rush. If he looks at it and he needs surgery, it's season over anyway. So it's not like, oh, let's get him in tomorrow and find out. It's either surgery and season's over, or no surgery and he can come back in around that 4-week mark. So yeah, it's going to be on a knife's edge. I think for like Supercoach fantasy purposes, I would assume not really. I don't know how you can hold him for 4 weeks, even if it comes back on Tuesday that it is. We'll talk about that in 2 seconds, because we'll just touch on Junior Paulo. His has come back that he does need surgery. The Eels, interestingly enough, have said 8 to 10 weeks, which, like, I was shocked when Wiramu Greg came back in 10 weeks from his lisfranc injury. I thought that was insane. But 8 weeks would just be unheard of. 10 weeks was unheard of enough as it is. So I don't see how he's going to be back in 8 weeks. I would assume Junior's season is over as well. But yeah, the lisfranc, it's a really tough one. It's the ACL of the foot. We call it that all the time. It's a ligament that you can't really muck around with in terms of having damage there. So, James, from a Supercoach fantasy perspective, as our Supercoach expert, mate, are you still a Latrell owner, and what are you doing with him?
Yeah, I am. I just want to take a broadside here at the Eels first day, Brian, if I could have the floor for a moment. I just think it's very presumptuous that they have put Junior Paulo coming back this year, given that they're running second last and are really not going to make the final. So that's extremely presumptuous by Para there. So I think they probably should take a bit of a reality check and realise that they're probably not going to be sniffing around the finals this year. And
Mate,
he's
they've
been
got
in a surgery.
what's his name? They've got Jaeman
Yeah,
Salmon listed on
coming back for
their
finals.
website.
I was like, guys, someone's going to tell you you're not looking like making the finals. And you know, Bronx fan, I'm outside the 8. I'm happy to take my licks on that, but man, oh man, that's eternally optimistic. Move on to Latrell. So Latrell, I am still an owner for Supercoach purposes. I am going to trade this week. I can't really afford to hold that much money in that position for that amount of time. There's a few people in mind. I guess we've got round 19 cover coming up next round. Not a lot of great options there for round 19, Brian, but I think you've got to make a plan to move him this week or the next week, depending on what your numbers shape up like, would be my take on things.
Yep, no, completely agree, mate.
Probably the only thing to add there, Brian, was even if it is a 4-week scenario, I'd still be moving on. I think if you have Latrell 4 weeks off, the Bunnies on the outside looking in, most likely to the finals, I still don't really like that scenario either. So, you know, whether it's season-ending surgery or whether it's the 4-week scenario, I think it's a sell either way. Would you agree as well, Brian? Sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
sort of say that explicitly then.
No, mate, absolutely agree. I think, he's just a sell for me. I think the one thing I would say with it is I'm just super disappointed because, like, obviously injury sucks no matter what. But I was super keen as a fan of footy to see if Souths could make the final because
Yeah.
Latrell was just in that mood where he, like, I know the commentators wax lyrical about it all the time, but it is legit when you see Latrell taking hit ups, like when he's like, "Yep, give me the ball, I'm taking hit ups," and he's just in that mood, which he can float in and out of at times. Mate, he was on one, and I reckon they could have given the finals a real red hot shake in terms of making it if he was fit and firing. That was one thing, especially as a Supercoach owner. I was happy to hold him through the last couple of weeks because I was like, he's going to brain it down the line and I'm just going to be sitting there loving it. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked out. But yeah, that's probably the biggest disappointment for me, I reckon.
Very sweet. Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. I think, you know, footy fan, you love to see Latrell when he's flying. He's just a gun. Like, you know, I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but I'm a huge fan. So hopefully we see him back sooner rather than later, Brian. Good to not see him in New South Wales setup though, so I'm pretty happy about that. But hopefully he's back sooner rather than later. It's not a long-term detriment to him. Sharks v Titans, no injuries out of that one, Brian. Broncos v Panthers was next. So Jock Madden and Daine Laurie with hamstring injuries, probably both in like the moderate range here, Brian. Hey, sort of looking at how much they were favouring it at time of injury. Hey.
Yeah, I think Jock Madden is the one that's pretty locked and loaded. Like he was top end sprint. He was leaning forward too, and that's another thing that we spoke about when Tommy Turbo did his. It's that, like, anybody out there who's listening, if you want to stretch your hamstring, bend forward and touch your toes, right? And you're going to feel that stretch on the hamstring. So if you're sprinting and then leaning forward as well, you're just putting so much pressure on it. He was sprinting, leaning for. It was almost like as he leant forward, because I think he kind of went to lunge and push an opposition player. You saw it go. He was very affected, almost had to get helped off the field at the end of the day. So yeah, 4 weeks minimum for Jock Madden, which is a bit of a hit to the Bronx. Although I think their replacement guy is a pretty good cup player. So I always like a cup player getting a run. And then Daine Laurie, yeah, look like he might be able to escape with a more minor one, but yeah, still thinking probably more likely that moderate sort of around a month for him.
Yeah,
How are
no other
you
things to
feeling?
do
How are
advance
you feeling
on.
as a Bronx fan, actually, with Jock
Well,
Madden
I,
going
I
down?
didn't mind. To be fair, Josh Rogers was good in the game he had early in the year. I was a bit surprised that he didn't get a look in more recently when they picked someone else, I think, recently. And I was like, oh, I thought Josh Rogers actually went all right. I think it might have been when Ezra Mann was sitting down and they might have paid Tristan Sailor at 6 maybe, or maybe played Sailor at fullback when he was a bit unders. And I just thought, oh, maybe Josh Rogers was a shot there. But yeah, he's been playing all right for Cup. So not good when we think Adam Reynolds is still probably around 21, around 22 prospect, I think is the time frame there. So it's the last thing that we sort of need. But yeah, the Broncos got to start stacking up the wins, Brian. Otherwise, we're going to be in deep trouble, deep trouble. Bulldogs v Warriors was few names out of this one. So Tohu Harris was ruled out pre-game with a wrist injury that he's been managing through the year. Charnze Nicoll-Klokstad looks like a calf concern. Marcelo Montoya with a groin concern. Jaeman Salmon has been confirmed as a jaw fracture. And then probably an update on Ryan Sutton here, Brian, as well. He's had a really complicated journey with lower limb injuries, looking like patella tendon more recently. So where do you want to start for the Dogs Warriors, Brian? I'll give you the floor here.
Mate, there's a bit to cover here. I think the one
Yeah.
I first want to do is put my hand up, and we as a podcast probably need to put our hands up, but particularly me as someone who runs a subscription service for injury stuff on Tohu Harris, because that is one I and we completely missed. He sat out, so I went back and checked I go back and kind of check the footage from games and stuff like that and saw that he's been wearing a wrist guard since round 7 was when he first started wearing something there. It got much more bulky in round 10 and then he missed some time after that. And then since he came back, mate, I haven't been watching Wales games close enough because it was like a phone book on his wrist. Like it was this huge strapping and, I'm not sure what was underneath it, but probably some sort of like cast or something like that. And his production was way down over since he came back from that. So that was definitely kind of an actionable thing. Seeing that and seeing his performance go down as well, that we just missed, unfortunately. Not going to get them all. But I think the main thing here is obviously he's been dealing with something. It's been getting worse and worse in terms of, I always hate volatility. This is something where, I'd be really happy. I think I had my eyes firmly on Mitch Barnett before he got picked for Origin. He was my big, I wanted to bring him in for round 20. As I'm sure many people did, he just got 120, but also off the back of the Tohu Harris thing, because I think this wrist thing, it could be a week, but it also could be 6. And that volatility is something I always like to bet against. I don't mind betting against volatility because I don't like it. I like predictability. I like to be able to sort of figure out what's going on. So, yeah, I think this is one where, there's going to be some opportunities in and around the Warriors and those kind of things because, yeah, it could be a lengthy recovery period for Tohu. Charnze with the calf, it didn't look too bad because he kind of seemed to suffer it early in the game and then played till halftime and then kind of pulled up pretty lame after a run just before the halftime. So whether he's done further damage there, it's still pretty rare for a calf to be up and down within a week, although they've got the bye. So potentially could be back after the bye, but I'd more be sitting in that 3 to 4 week range, which, man, how good would it be to see Roger Tuivasa back at fullback? I would absolutely love that. Marcelo Montoya with the groin, yeah, look, that's a bit of a tough one. Groins, as we say, groins are often referred to as day-to-day, so they can improve quite significantly with each day as it passes. So that one will be a bit up in the air. Jaeman Salmon with the jaw, he's had surgery today. Dogs are expecting 6 weeks. Phil, my good friend Phil Gould, he initially said 4 to 5 weeks. I mean, I put that on my post because, I'm never going to doubt Dr. Gould, but I always thought, yeah, I just don't, unless it's the most minor of minor jaw fractures, 4 to 5 would have just been ridiculous. So, yeah, he's expected to miss 6 weeks. So, some opportunities for our man, Maxi King, mate, just solidifying his role in the middle there. And then another one, I think, man, the game is just so, it's just cruel sometimes, and this is one of them. Like Ryan Sutton, he has surgery in the preseason on his knee, misses a good 10 to 12 weeks. He's just about to come back and then suffers a hip injury, which he's then out for another 8 to 10 weeks with. He comes back. He's only been back not that long at all. And he ruptures his patella tendon, which, along with the Achilles tendon, is one of the most significant injuries that we see in terms of like tough rehab, return to performance, those kind of things. It's one of the most serious musculoskeletal injuries for a player to suffer, and potentially career-altering injuries that we see players suffer. So yeah, just want to like big shout out to him. We were talking off air, kind of the strapping that he had on that knee, and even the surgery that he had a fair incision directly over his patella tendon. So I don't know what they were obviously doing some work in the preseason in and around the patella tendon. So I think potentially this is something where there was an issue there before, and this has exacerbated it. But yeah, just want to shout out to Ryan Sutton, because that was absolutely brutal. But yeah, mate, I mean, from your perspective, like Tohu is probably the biggest one, Tohu and Jaeman Salmon are probably the two from a Supercoach perspective, like in terms of giving opportunities to others. Is there any kind of like takeaways that you have on that front?
I guess it depends if you believe in Adam Blake. He's really bottom out in price. I think he might even be sub 600 this week coming. I'd have to do the maths on that. But I guess if you think Tohu Harris isn't there, Michi Barnett's on origin duty, can Adam just find some attacking stats, which he clearly can find? Maybe you lean in that way for the run home if the Warriors are going to make a bit of a dip. So he might be the only one there. I don't think there's really too many takeaways out of the Bulldogs there, because Jacob Preston should be back pretty soon. Billy Kickout's going to play 80 there. I wouldn't see much opportunity at the Dogs setup. But any other ones you can think of there, Brian? But I think Addin Fanua was the one. You could actually save money by trading Terrell May to Addin Fanua. So that's relatively attractive if you just are short on trades and you need to just bring in another, keeper, to use that terminology, and get a bit of money for upgrades elsewhere, perhaps.
Yeah, mate, it's just gold for me as a Curran and Max King owner. I just like, they were two guys who maybe a month ago I was kind of looking at as, I might have to trade them out at some point, but now I'm like, yeah, they're golden.
Yeah, they've been flying recently anyway, so I'm not moving them at all. And Max King's son's name is Hercules. So, like we said last week, Brian, we cannot move him out of your team. That's bad, bad, bad karma if you're going to do that. Tigers vs Storm was the next one, Brian. Harry Grant was ruled out pre-game with that sternum injury. He looks like he's been selected for the Maroons with that, so hopefully not too many performance implications there for Harry. Nelson Asofa Solomona was a hamstring injury out of this one. He had a hamstring. He's had one or two earlier in the year as well, I think, Brian. And then Bronson Garlick was the last one on this list with a back injury. Probably Harry Grant's the big one here for the Maroons, Brian. What do you think about Harry? He hasn't sort of played a game since Origin 2, has he?
Yeah, mate. It probably makes a bit of sense with what he's reportedly dealing with. I think from a sternum perspective, like that, it's a bit like rib cartilage injuries. Pain is the main issue, and they're super painful. So it's an area in footy that it's really hard to avoid contact to. Obviously, you make a lot of tackles, cop a lot of tackles in and around the sternum, but I think the overall implication that I have is that he's going to be a risk of in-game aggravation moving forward, even though he's had the couple of weeks off, which gives me a lot of positivity around his prospects, because you very rarely, when guys are dealing with these kind of injuries, you see them have like 2 or 3 weeks off, and the Storm have the ability to do that with where they are at the moment, which is fantastic. But yeah, I just think here it's like Origin is just one of those things where everything's 120%. I still am a little bit concerned. If he gets through Origin all good, then I'm a Harry Grant owner in Classic. I'm not overly concerned moving forward. It's just more if he suffers that aggravation in Origin, it's going to leave it that he's probably still going to be, dealing with it on and off for the next 3 to 4 weeks, even after Origin, which would be a bit of a hit. What are your thoughts as a Harry Grant owner?
So I don't have Harry. So I've got
Oh, there you go.
Coro and Jeremy Marshall-King. So I was rolling those two boys, and with Jeremy Marshall-King being missing, I am just having to sit him there, and I'll trade him out if and when I need to. I just don't have the trades to make it happen. If I did have Harry, depends how many trades I'd have Brien. God, it makes me a bit apprehensive managing a guy with a sternum, but he's so good for the Storm from a fantasy point of view. So I think you just have to hold him. He's elite at the position. There's really only Coruscant that's like the sideways move there, I reckon. Unless you're going to Connor Watson, then he's probably not a bad little prospect because boy, oh boy, Connor Watson's been good for Supercoach this year. And he's pumping out 80. Radley's not there. He's not going to see 13. But you got to wait for him to get through Origin is probably the thing with Connor Watson. But that'd be the only other things I would go to.
Yeah, I think for me, it's more. It makes him less likely to back up after Origin is probably my main concern. I did bring in Blake Brayley a couple of weeks ago, so I'm pretty set there. Although, yeah, Blake Brayley won't play round 20. I just realised, so I'm not really set there. So that could be a bit of a problem. Might be running an auto emergency that week. Nelson Asofa Solomona with the hamstring. Apparently minor is what the Storm have said, and then Bronson Garlick with the back. It was just spasms. So 9 times out of 10, it's just something that needs a bit of time to settle. There can be some underlying disc issues, but it is quite rare.
Cowboys versus Manly was the next one, Ryan. Barnstormer of a game, this one. Went to go on point for the Manly team. So Jason Saab with a lower limb injury, Tolu Koula with a knee injury, and Murray Taulagi is that hamstring injury, which again, as you mentioned on the socials, is going to rule him out of Origin 3, Brian. Murray Taulagi's had a few hamstrings in the past, hasn't he?
Yeah, mate, this is at least his second. I think he was dealing with a bit of hamstring tightness as well. So he's had 2 legit injuries and then some tightness at one point as well, or some awareness or whatever you want to say. So, look, I think the prospects here are a bit like your likes of Xavier Coates, where even if it's a minor injury, it's usually going to extend the recovery out a little bit. So I think for the Cows, I'd be surprised to see him back after the bye. I think it's more likely you're looking at least 3 to 4 weeks and potentially longer, depending on the damage. He did get through the full 80, which is obviously a good sign. But yeah, still probably starting with that base rate of 3 to 4 weeks and then see where he goes. Mate, we've got some breaking news on Tolu Koula for the knee. I was just reading before we came on. So he suffered a moderate grade MCL injury, played out the game. And this is something I don't know if you remember, well, we spoke about this a while back where I'm like, MCLs are almost becoming the new syndesmosis injuries, where it's like guys just can strap it up and get through the game somehow, which is not something that I think I've seen historically. And then it comes out, the next day, 2 days later, that they're going to need to miss a month or whatnot. And Tolu Koula actually had a follower one on Twitter and one on Instagram message me and ask about, because he injured it in like the 5th minute or something like that, sort of saying, oh, did you see the injury? He got it strapped. And I went back and checked it, and I replied to both of them today being like, oh, look, looks like an MCL sprain, but should be, he got through the game, so you'd assume minor. But here's the guy, he's going to miss a month now. So that, thank God I didn't bring him in this week from a Supercoach perspective, which is huge. The Lehigh Hopewadi owners will be jumping for joy because he obviously will get another run, I would assume, moving forward. But that's big news. Big news. So like moderate grade MCL sprain, you're usually looking at somewhere in that kind of 3 to 4 week range. So that would probably be about right for Koula. And then Saab was just cramping. So, well, that's what Manly said anyway. I looked at the mechanism and I couldn't really see much. Looked like maybe he copped like a knee-to-knee contact, but it was only one shot from the wide angle, so it didn't really give me much info, which is why I didn't post about it. But yeah, mate, Koula, from a Supercoach perspective, that's big implications, hey?
Yeah, you think Lehigh is probably the natural straight swap there, given that they returned Turbo through the centres. Turbo didn't get named for New South Wales. I guess you got to make that sort of punt at some point, but you probably want to see Tom get named at fullback, don't you, before you take the punt with him in your team. I think he could be someone who could be a real point of difference towards the end of the year, and Manly have a pretty good run as well, so he would be someone that I know I'm watching like an absolute hawk at the moment. I've just got eyes on Tom Trbojevic. If he ever gets the number 1 on his back again, it is straight into my team will be what's happening, and be damned with all the injuries that we seem to always cop with him in our fantasy teams. I'm rolling with him anyway. If Tom Trbojevic is healthy, he's in a Supercoach roster of mine, is all I'll say. Friend of the show, Tom Trbojevic, always got a spot in my team. Roosters v Dragons here, Brien. So Raymond Faitala Mariner was a pre-game injury rule-out with back spasms there. Probably not much more to update there for the Dragons. I think they have the bye. Is it round? It's next week. They have the bye, don't they? Sorry.
No, round 20.
Or no, round 20. Sorry, round 20. So that's a little bit dicey, I suppose, for a next week backup, but probably not much else apart from that, is it?
No, mate, I think, like once again, as I said, with back spasms, it can be 9 times out of 10, it's nothing. It just needs a bit of a breather. So hopefully that's the case for Ray, because I love Ray.
Yeah, we're all about him. Raiders v Knights was the last game here. So probably firstly, shout out to Kalen Ponga. I think NRL.com had him at 260 run meters, if you don't mind, coming off an 11-week return from that lisfranc injury. That is absolutely wild from that point of view. And seeing him getting a start in the Queensland 17 is box office for me. I cannot wait for that. A lot of other bedsheet decisions, but that one is a very good one. Probably a very obvious one, but it's a good one. We'll give Billy some flowers there for that. Out of this game as well, so Hudson Young was a groin injury. He was ruled out pre-game. Adam Elliott was ruled out with illness. Inari Tuala was a calf injury out of this one, and Greg Muzzy was reported as cramping there. Any other things you want to touch on from this game, Brian?
Yeah, I think a lot of Supercoach people had problems with Mars. He looked pretty restricted at the end. I think every man and his dog brought him in this week. Yeah, but it just looked like cramping. He made a line break sort of halfway or towards the end of the game. And yeah, just never seemed to get back to 100% after that. I remember when they scored there, because it was just after he made the line break that the Raiders took that intercept and kind of ran. And mate, there were like props running past poor old Greg. Like he was struggling hard in the chase. So yeah, he was in all sorts, but I think it was just cramping. And Ari Tuola, that was an interesting one, I think, for the mechanism physio nerds out there, because yeah, he had that push off, that classic push off, but he almost looked like he did the classic like Achilles glance back. He kind of did it, glance back, was like, what the hell? So yeah, like obviously it's come out as calf, and that's obviously much more desirable than an Achilles. But yeah, he'll be missing at least 3 to 4 weeks, I'd say, with that. Adam Elliott illness, and then Hudson Young was limping really heavily after the game last week. Apparently it's just groin tightness, so you'd expect him back. I don't think they're playing next week, so I think you'd expect him back. Are they playing next week? I'm not sure, but I'd expect him back either next week or the week after.
Yep, all good. From there, Brian, we can just go straight into the Patreon questions like we always do. So patreon.com/NRL Physio. If you want these questions answered, let's get into it, Brian. We've got a fair few to get through, as we always do tonight. Question number 1 is, do you reckon Kalen Ponga came back too early from his lisfranc injury? And then the second part of that is, should Queensland pick him for Origin? I guess the cat's out the bag. He has been selected by Billy Slater. What did you make of his return from the lisfranc, Brian?
Yeah, mate. I don't think it was too early. I think there's once again we're going to get into nerd chat here, but and it's only a component of it. But I think surgical technique plays a big role here, because it's interesting with this. You've got Kalen Ponga returning at 11 weeks. We had Wiramu Greg back in 10 weeks last year. But then we've got a guy like Hayes Dunster. Hayes Dunster is currently at least 13, 14 weeks post lisfranc surgery, has just had a second surgical procedure to have the screw removed from that area, and he's aiming to return in round 20 or 21. So you're looking at, a 16, 17, 18-week return to play for someone like Dunster, 11 weeks for Ponga. People are like, how is that possible? So I think it's really interesting or worth people noting that Ponga had a surgical technique, a bit like they call it the tightrope surgery, which you would have heard of probably more commonly in the syndesmosis injury landscape. Now, we've spoken at length about the syndesmosis injury recovery being the one that has just been reduced so massively in recent years due to the use of the tightrope. So it's literally just a cord that is inserted and stabilizes, whether it be the lisfranc or the syndesmosis area. It's so much more effective in terms of accelerating early recovery, because if you have someone like Dunster who needs like a surgical screw put in there, you can't really push that too quickly because you've got this hard, this hard screw right through the joint. So the joint isn't very mobile. You can't really push it all that much. Whereas with a cord, it more, I guess, closely mimics that ligament. So things can be accelerated. So that's only one component of this entire thing, because as we spoke about earlier, with the lisfranc injuries, you can have one ligament torn, no fracture, or you can have a really nasty fracture, multiple ligaments torn. And those two things are going to have very different recoveries in themselves. But surgical technique does play a role here. And the fact that Ponga has been able to avoid needing something like a screw and needing a second surgical technique, we've seen guys come back in that 10, 11, 12-week mark. So I don't think it's been too early for him, as we saw today. I mean, he performed, I thought, quite well, especially in his first week back. I think he was a no-brainer for Origin personally. I think he just needed to be picked, a bit like Fafita. But yeah, I think he is the ideal sort of, they were looking for that Selwyn Cobbo role. I think Ponga probably would have been the Selwyn Cobbo role in Origin 1 if he had been fit. So yeah, I love players like that coming off the bench and ripping and tearing. What about you, James?
Yeah, agree. So I don't think he came back too early. He looked really good today. You might, maybe make a point that his aerobic tank wasn't quite where it needs to be, but that's just match fitness, and the only way you get better at that is by playing matches. So I didn't have an issue there. Should we have picked him? Absolutely. We need him in our setups. I think it's a good shout for him to get picked for Origin 3. On the topic of lisfrancs, Brian, the second question here is, why has there been so many lisfranc injuries this year? Is it bad luck, or is there something more to it? Is there anything we can attribute to it?
Mate, this question made me laugh because it made me think back to when Kalen suffered his, and remember how it was like all the blow up about he was playing through the hip pointer, and that was what caused his
That's what
lisfranc.
caused it.
And now we've had like so many lisfrancs, and so now it's like, what's causing the lisfrancs? And I'm like, yeah, it's just so funny how we're like, it's normal to always be looking for a reason, but sometimes it's just one of those things. I think we've spoken about hamstrings being up and potentially the wet weather, but here, lisfrancs more often than not are traumatic injuries. That, like, one of the most common ways that I see it outside of sport are people slamming on their brakes in a car accident and it happening that way. So literally car crash type injuries. So yeah, it's bad luck mostly. Like we saw, if you have a look at that Latrell mechanism of injury, like he had Dylan Brown just fall on his foot while his foot was stuck in, or his toes were stuck in the turf. So yeah, it's just one of those things that happens. You can get innocuous ones like the Junior Paulo one, which I think anybody who still thinks that Kalen Ponga's was due to, dealing with a hip pointer or whatever, you have a look and see that, lisfranc injuries, even though Ponga's was traumatic and it was twisting and someone landed on it, you can have ones, even in guys who aren't dealing with hip pointers, where it just happens quite innocuously. It's more like a build-up over time. But yeah, I'm definitely in it's just bad luck. We'll probably go a season, maybe next season or the season after, where there's one or two. So it just ebbs and flows a bit, I think. Are you kind of on the same wavelength?
Yeah, it was similar in an NFL season as well. I think there was 5 or 6, highly rostered players in an NFL season a couple of years ago, I think, Brian, from memory. And I remember people at the time were just like, oh, there's so many of these injuries. What's happening with it? And then you don't hear about it for a little bit, and we sort of go through those phases. But I don't think there's anything more to it than that. Question 3 is about Cade Dyke. So he had cartilage surgery on his knee. Patrons here said, like, I've never heard of that before. Can you talk to us a bit more about that surgery and what it might entail?
Yeah, mate, this was a really interesting one. I only came across this surgery so it's called autocart. I only came across it about 18 months ago. I'd kind of seen a few things posted about it and I've still to this day never seen a patient myself who's had it. But yeah, did a bit of reading on it about 18 months ago and saw that the initial kind of results seemed to be pretty encouraging. We're obviously 18 months down the track. I did a bit of a review again. It's still looking pretty encouraging. I think for people listening, cartilage regeneration, what's the best way to put it? It's almost like the holy grail of orthopedic surgery, I think, is it's the thing that we struggle as a sports medicine community to achieve is regrowing cartilage. You hear about people talk about bone on bone. I've got bone on bone in my knee. Like if I hear that once, I hear it 20 times a week. And it's because cartilage, it doesn't regrow on its own. It struggles to regrow on its own. So that's really, really tough. So with this surgery, what effectively they do, there'll be like a cartilage tear, and they'll actually go in and shave the cartilage tear and kind of smooth it out. So they will remove bits of the rough cartilage. They'll have a vacuum in there that sucks up those bits of cartilage as they're shaving off. They take it out, they mix it with like a bonding agent or almost like PRP, these kind of things. So it makes like a paste of like kind of like biologic material and the cartilage, and then they put the paste back on there. And like I've seen some cases where the surgeons have described it like 12, 18 months down the track. It's been done for I think about 3 or 4 years now, where the surgeons have described it as they've gone back in and had a look with a camera, and they're like, I wouldn't have even known that there was a cartilage tear there in the first place. So yeah, look, like it's still very early days. And I think, anybody out there who's listening who's got cartilage issues, I wouldn't see this as like, it works for everyone. Obviously talk to your physio, your doctor, and see what's going on. But like stuff like this is really, I find it really interesting and really cool because it's something that, we struggle with, as I said, as physios, as surgeons. It's a tough thing to overcome sometimes. So seeing like new cutting edge things like this, albeit it is early, is pretty cool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's one of those ones. It's got a high burden of disease, doesn't it? Like osteoarthritis or arthritic changes to people's joints. And the one thing we really struggle with, to your point, is we just haven't been able to find anything artificial that can mimic the smoothness of someone's cartilage. Like we're not even in the same stratosphere, really. Like if you think, what's a stupid example? Like a Teflon, like frying pan, that's got a really smooth surface. Then like, healthy articular cartilage is way, way, way smoother than that. And we can't even find anything or manufacture anything that remotely mimics that. So it's something where we just are miles away from this incredible ability of the human body to do its thing over many, many, many millennia. Probably not much else to talk about there, Brian. So we'll go on to question 4 about Tom Flegler. This is a good question for a Finns fan. So any update on whether he required nerve transfer surgery? I haven't heard anything on Tom Flegler in a while. I've been trying to pester a few people to get updates about him in the sports med community, but I haven't been successful, unfortunately. Have you heard anything?
Mate, another breaking news on the Sponge. We're all about breaking news, and I had nothing on this until like 2 days ago. I spoke to someone who is directly in contact with that whole situation. And once again, it's all, he told me that they were told, so I'm not saying this definitely is how it went down, but the guy who told me has a pretty good understanding of these kind of things. So apparently, Tom Flegler went in and had a small surgical procedure to clean up the scar tissue around the nerve. So, look, I'm not a neurosurgeon by any means, but I have heard of people getting cleanups around nerves where they go in and kind of, clear some things out and try and make sure that the nerve's not getting impinged anywhere or anything like that, but also to directly test the nerve to see if it was alive or dead. And the good news is that the nerve was still alive. So when they went in there, the nerve, by all accounts, is still alive. It's still kicking. There is still stuff going through. So their general opinion was, off the back of that surgery, that he won't require the nerve transfer surgery at this stage, is their position at the moment. So that's exciting stuff. He's still not going to play this year. I would be very, very shocked, which kills me as, just as a fan of footy, but also as a Finns fan, obviously. But I think with these kind of like weird, out there, unique injuries, just freak injuries, even little positive news like that, it just means so much more. So, just really good to hear that that nerve's still alive and kicking.
Yeah, very good news there prognostically, Brian. I guess it still doesn't make his time frame returning to footy any clearer, but I think the fact that he doesn't have to undergo any other form of, nerve transfer type surgery, that's enormously positive. So fingers crossed there for Tommy Flegler. Staying on the Finns there, and Queensland Spirit as well. Any updates on Tommy Gilbert and Tino Fa'asuamaleaui about their ACL recovery?
Yeah, so Tommy Gilbert's not long removed from his, because he had that the pulmonary embolism, I think it was, the blood clot that traveled to his lungs. So he only had surgery really recently. So there wouldn't be much to update on him. But Tino is apparently just returned to running. So he's pretty much on track. He's doing quite well. Usually guys are returning to running at around that 3 to 4 month mark, which is around about where Tino is at this point in time. So yeah, it sounds like Tino's on track. He should be fine for round 1 next year. Tom Gilbert will be pushing it. But yeah, everything's on track for them as far as I've heard.
Good news. Next question, Brian. This is a long question, so I'll sort of tell it to you as succinctly as I can. Do you reckon the NRL should bring in mandated reporting of team practice sessions? Because the NFL do a similar thing. I guess the thinking behind this is, given how much money the game receives from betting endorsements, should fans and punters alike be given transparency about, I guess, practice availability and practice participation? Because we hear it a lot, all too often a player's ruled out now before kickoff, and then the coach in the presser says, "Oh, well, actually, they had this injury in practice and they didn't even practice all week." And it can be a bit of a nightmare for fantasy football purposes, I suppose, and also fans of the game as well, Brian. What do you reckon about mandated reporting for practice sessions? NFL does do a pretty similar thing, don't they, I think?
Mate, I'm, from a personal standpoint, all about it. Like, what I do, it would just be golden for my interests and kind of keeping on top of these things as somebody, pardon me, who is a fan, who is, loves Supercoach Fantasy, those kind of things. It is right in my wheelhouse. The problem, this question is, do you think the NRL should bring it in? I just think I'm someone who I would love it to come in so much. I would really struggle to counter the arguments that NRL clubs would have about it, which is like the privacy to medical information, number one, which is hard to overcome at the best of times. Nor should you try and overcome it. But number two, it's the the professional advantage that you get from not having to let your opposition know that a player is in or out and those kind of things. Those two things are really hard to argue against. I think the argument against it is the integrity of the game in terms of betting and those kind of things. Because even though, I think you shouldn't really give two shits about betting at times. Like, it's, betting is betting and it's got, that reputation sometimes with being shady. But at the end of the day, it is something that can be taken advantage of pretty heavily by some people if they have inside knowledge, and, players getting ruled out can sway, things and all that kind of stuff. So I do understand it from the integrity of the game perspective, but I think, the argument is that the balance is pretty good at the moment, fairly good. I would love it to be better. I think if you had me sitting on one side of the debate and somebody over there sitting on the other side, I'd struggle to beat that person in the debate, even as somebody who really wants it quite hard, I think, is probably my only issue with it. So should the NRL bring it in? From a personal perspective, yes, but I can see from an NRL club, an NRL player perspective, why it shouldn't be brought in. What about you, James? Where do you sit on this one?
Yeah, I don't mind how the NFL does do it. I guess what you'd find is you just get everyone slapped with a questionable label, and it wouldn't really help things become all that much clearer, I don't think, because as we see in NFL all the time, it's like questionable, 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 and some of the stuff's relevant, some of the stuff's completely irrelevant. But their status is they have to mandate their practice participation levels as well. So did not practice, limited practice, doubtful, questionable, or out is something that they have to mandate. I don't know the background to that as to why that is. I don't know if that's because of gambling statuses or something like that. I really don't know why they do it the way they've done. I've just had a quick squiz in, and I can't see anything as to why they do that to make all the injuries known. But even then, there was a situation last year where, like, Joe Burrow had a TFCC injury in his wrist that he had practiced with all week, but they didn't disclose, and then he was really out in the game with it, and then they said, "Oh, he's actually been managing this in the week," and they got wrapped over the knuckles for that because they didn't disclose that injury for competitive advantage, obviously, because he's a high-profile player in a high-profile position. So I don't think you really see it get overcome from that point of view. I even look at NRL stuff, mate, where player salaries are still completely unknown. So I don't think this is going to get across the line anyway. I think that's where it sort of stands from my point of view. Last one, Brian, from Patreon here is, why do bad things happen to good people? We can apply this to a lot of situations and scenarios there, but what's your read on the Patreon here? What are they insinuating or asking about specifically? I've got a few
Well,
tens I can go here.
I think number one for me, the Finns losing Jeremy Marshall-King has to be number one, what they're referring to, because the good people of the Finns organisation, I think Jeremy Marshall-King was like the number one player we couldn't afford to lose. Like even Hammer. I would lose Hammer because Trey Fuller, is a good replacement. But yeah, Jeremy Marshall-King is going to be a real hard one. But I think the Patreon who asked this today about midday or somewhere around there, I think they had a good line. They must have had the inside word that Billy wasn't going to pick Dave Fafita. And the bad thing is Dave
that's where I was going
Fafita
with it. Yeah, I was going
not
to go
getting
there,
picked. Yeah, it has. That has to be what it is, I think, James, because you and I were messaging. I think it was either this morning or yesterday afternoon when there was like a predicted. Courier Mail came out with we've got the inside word. Here's the predicted Queensland team, and we kind of went backwards and forwards and went, how good's this? Dave Fafita was starting. Jaden Sewer was on the bench. I think Felice and Kate Will had been dropped. And Kalen Ponga was on the bench, and we were just frothing at the mouth. We were like, how good's this team look? This is fantastic. And then it's come out today, and it is the complete opposite. So I think that's the bad thing that's happened to the good people, which is you and me.
Yeah, I was going to lean into Dave Fafita stuff again, and you've obviously gone there straight away, Brian. So I just want to echo that. The other thing is, the Titans have been winning games of footy too. Like, the Titans haven't been that bad recently. So, I think Fafita's been going good there. I cannot wrap my head around why this is happening. Depending on how the result goes, Brian, this could be a really, really interesting post-game talking point, win or lose for Queensland. Because I think even if Queensland win or it's close or whatever happens, I think there's still a question to be had here about this situation. Like, because there's really no logical explanation for it. You can talk off the ball efforts if you want, but there's no way compared to the other people that are selected in this team, then he's going worse in those specific things than other players. There's just not so there's clearly more to this story. We're probably it's never gonna see the light of day, and I don't think Fafita's gonna spill his lollies to journos or anything like that, but there's gotta be something else going on here, mate. I don't know. Conspiracy hat well and truly on, but this reeks of a big old sweep under the rug situation. Don't know what, don't know how. I can't turn it into more than a conspiracy than that, but I don't know. I don't know what's doing.
Yeah, mate. For me, I mean, anybody who listens to this show will know that the two of us are some of the biggest Queensland fans going around. We love G'ing up like everything about Origin and, the bullshit behind like we're still Queenslanders and Queensland spirit. And I will make jokes about that till the cows come home because I find it insanely funny. But I'm also a massive process over results kind of guy because I think the better your process is, the more of the results are going to go in your direction. So yeah, this process just does me head in. It absolutely does me head in. But anyway, in Billy we trust. We're still Queenslanders. We'll roll out all the sound bites, and hopefully we'll be celebrating on Wednesday night in about 10 days time. James, I'll throw to you Supercoach Corner. Don't mind throwing to you this week. I've had a really good week. You're done, I think, about par or maybe just a little bit under. But yeah, hit us with your plans about how you're going to charge to the end of the season.
Yeah, you've had another stomper on me this week, Brian. So credit to you here. You must be shooting up there, getting some green arrows there. 12.41 for me though, so it does feel unders. There's just a lot of big scores lurking out there this week. So I guess the main takeaway from that was I hit VC on Latrell and looped him. I traded in Militalo and Marzio this week, so that was a bit of a mixed bag of results. I guess Militalo was close to some extra stats, but I really need him to get red hot for the run home now with the limited trades I have available. For next round, I have 14 for next round, but I want to upgrade a couple of them to better options. So my plans, now that Hamoli Olakawatu isn't named for New South Wales, he's at a really good price. I can get him in for probably Brendan Piakura or Sean Lane are probably my two options there to get up. I've had both of those guys since day dot, so I don't know how they've lasted in my team for this long, to be honest. But anyway, one of them's got to go this week. And then the other one is either Ruben Garrick in for Isaac Tungo or Latrell Mitchell. Probably depends on the news for Latrell there. I'm pretty resigned to moving Latrell on and upgrading him to Ruben Garrick. That way I can put Garrick in that position and flick him in with Carl Iro if I need for a few weeks, just until I figure out what I do to upgrade Sharp at fullback as well. So I guess ultimately, after those two trades this week, leaves me with 6 and about 450 in the bank is approximate where I'm going to be. So I do have some coin, but not too many trades, obviously. And really, I need to get rid of Piakura, Isaac Tungo, Sharp, and Latrell. They're the 4 I need to get rid of. So that leaves me with 4 trades left to hold for the rest of the year. Maybe Walker to Cleary, but I don't really see that happening for me until maybe round 21, maybe round 22 if Cleary sheds some dollars because he's got a very high break even. I'd really like Terrell May to Payne Haas because Payne Haas, to me, looks like he's going to blow up post-Origin. Looks like he's going to get massive minutes from Kevy to try and get some Ws, but I just don't think I have enough trades up my sleeve to get there. There's probably a luxury pick to go Terrell May to Payne Haas, unfortunately for me, especially in that position. So that's what I'm going to do for the next little bit, Brian. So yeah, probably make 2 more this week. That leaves me with 6, I think, which is probably well unders. But I think by the time I do that, then I've got enough players there that I just need to get 1 more in at fullback and maybe roll with 5.
Mate,
Maybe
you've got
roll
to
with 4, as long as I
got to
can.
get Teddy. Surely you've got to be getting Teddy.
Yeah, I guess he's on bye this week, so
Oh yeah,
round
but I
20
just
is
mean
probably
surely
yeah.
got to do it.
Yeah, it was just one of those. It was one of those ones. I think I was gonna go. Well, I went Latrell when Teddy obviously was brought in by a lot of other people. So I think I was just that week later on Latrell, and then Sharp was there, and I was like, I can just squeeze out a little bit more money, then I can just move it around for the rest of the year. So yeah, Teddy's been my big miss. Teddy and also like Tyron Wishart has been a big miss for me. I didn't have those two guys. Jack Bostock was another one as well. So they've probably been my 3 big misses in terms of big minutes, big points, big numbers, big price rises. Those have been the big ones there. So, mate, you went big again this week. You're going to be sniffing around the tippity top there. Hopefully your trades hold up for you. That's probably the only thing that can bring it all crashing down. It's like Icarus flying too close to the sun, isn't it?
Mate, every year it's the same. I swear, if you go through my history on because you can look at like the history of your previous seasons and it shows you like how many trades you made per round. And I don't reckon I have had a trade after like round 22 in any season ever. It's just, set your team up and then coast and see how you go. It's worked for me pretty well. Like I've had some, I think one top 100
you've done good.
finish and
Yeah.
a top 200 finish. So yeah, look, I don't mind it, especially as a guy who, used to. Now we're very heavily into classic, obviously as classic experts, but love our draft too. So I scored 1435 this week. My only trade was Mars Hugh in for Manu. Got to shout out Maxi King, as you say, the father of Hercules. So I think we need to. I want to start it. Max King's nickname has to be Zeus moving forward, surely, doesn't it? That's
100%.
that's got to stick. I feel like.
Well, Brian, look at his season that he's having. He gets married, clearly has sex because he's got a son, and he's got a son called Hercules, and he's pumping out the biggest Supercoach scores you've ever seen. He was your injury buy of the year as well. This is Max King's year. This is Zeus King's year in 2024, Brian. Sign me up. I'm here for it.
Yeah, that's my campaign now, is that Max King from here on out is being called Zeus because he pumped out 90 and I'm pretty sure it was mostly in base. Maybe he got maybe a line break assist, but he did go into extra time, I understand, but yeah, he is just killing it at the moment. I'm loving it. Absolutely loving it. So I've got 12 for next week. I literally had to change this as we were coming on because I said 11 because I thought Dave Fifita was going to get picked. Another Dave Fifita mention. But got 12. So I think Olokoatu, you just have to bring him in, I think, at his price now that we haven't seen 18th man, which is the one thing I will probably know by tomorrow when this comes out. But if he's 18th man, I'm almost going to hold because I've got 12 players and they're 12 pretty solid players. And what I'd put in here was I had 11 when I didn't think I had Fafita, and I was happy to only bring in a Lokoatu and just have 12 because I don't love the look of many guys who are available in round 19, particularly around like CTW and fullback, which is where I've got guys to trade. So I've got to replace Latrell at some point, but like none of the round 19 options really, jump out at me. I'd rather wait and jump on like a Ponga, Edwards, even Drinky. The Cowboys have got like 7 of their last 8 games or something up in North Queensland, something ridiculous. So Drinky could be a sneaky little buy as well, or even Reece Walsh, depending on how he comes out of Origin too. So he's someone who I'm looking at. Cleary is the other. Effectively, I want to look at one gun forward. The way I'm looking at it, I've got 7 trades left. One gun forward, a fullback, Cleary, and another centre wing. So it leaves me 3 trades, which, look, it might sound crazy to a lot of people out there, but this is just the way I do it. And it's fun. I enjoy it. And it does okay for me at times. So that's what I'm aiming for at the moment. My forward gun was going to be Mitch Barnett. Now it's probably going to be a Lokoatu. I think Cleary, one of those fullbacks. And then at centre wing, I'm not sure. James, have you got any? I think I wouldn't mind like a point of difference upside guy. I was looking, Val Holmes is really cheap, but he's kind of heavily owned. I was looking at Asako. He's pretty cheap, but once again, heavily owned. I'm trying to think.
Raz, 11%.
Yeah.
He's not like pod. The other one was this week just gone was Jesse Raymond put up a score as well with like not many attacking stats. I think he had like 5 offloads as well. Let me just check Jesse Raymond. I think he scored, he scored 73.
Yeah, and he could have got that other try from Nico if they didn't call it forward, which I thought was pretty dicey. So
he had like 8, or he had 2 effective offloads and 3 ineffective. 36 in, like, he's got a high base here. He's got 52 in base for a center wing. Like, that's pretty wild. Like, he's priced at 570. But Jesse Raymond's one, like, I sort of looked at him compared to what Mulatalo threw up, and I was like, oh man, maybe that was the play. But Raymond's been on a little bit of a tear of late. Brian Kelly's another one that doesn't get much love, but man, Brian Kelly rarely scores under 60, and the Titans just have points in them. I don't know, like maybe Brian Kelly's one that's worth a sneaky stab, but Raymond's pretty good. He's come off the back of, I think it was an 84 last week with, or 86 last week with 1 try assist. And again, in base, he's got 30. He's got 55 in base and 52 in base week to week. Like, that's pretty outrageous for a center. And then you throw in all the attacking stats on top of that, like, and we know he's a tackle break machine. So if you do base and power, it's a pretty attractive prospect with old Jesse Raymond there. Other ones there, Brian, I guess, probably Val Holmes would be one. I really rate that as a good shout there. I don't have Garrick, but again, Garrick's super highly owned, so I can't really justify him. And you probably have Garrick in your team, I'm assuming, as well. Like, he's pretty highly rostered. But I guess apart from that, I'll just keep doing some digging there, Brian, while you're on that same floor process. I'll just quickly drag up Brian Kelly's sort of stuff here, because where was he this week? Just gone.
Yeah, he's the one.
He
He's the one that I kind of looked at.
Yeah. So he's low 6s, 630, 46 last week. But man, you look at his scores. He, like, if you look at like let's just do like round 11 onwards: 73, 71, 65, 60, 61, 86, and in that time, there's only 1 try and 1 try assist. It's like Gagai last year levels type stuff, like where he's just scoring points for fun. He was goal kicking for a few weeks in there, which sort of pumped him up a little bit. He's not doing that at the moment, but he's he only scored 46 last week, but boy oh boy, he's been putting up some pretty big numbers there as well.
I might have to look at his draw. He might be maybe I bring him in next week as because I think my option is a bit like what you're saying. I think I want to wait a couple of weeks before I decide on that fullback. So I probably trade Latrell down to like a CTW, and then I can float like a Kaeliro or a Ruben Garrick through fullback and just wait a couple of weeks. Maybe Ponga goes down in price and then I jump on him or something like that. So yeah, I could potentially get Brian Kelly next week. You've definitely piqued my interest. My one thing with Kelly is he just doesn't have that, or doesn't seem to have that, like 120 game in him, which look, not a lot of guys do.
Yeah.
But it's like, do I wait an extra couple of weeks and get a Val Holmes who once again has like 70s, whatever it is, 6 of his last 8 games in North Queensland, and potentially he could, he probably has that 120 game in him. So that's, I guess that's the
goal
toss-up.
kicking as well. Like, his floor's so good. Like, it's hard to argue with it, isn't it? With Val Holmes, like, he's obviously streaky, but in Clubland, he's pretty unmatched at that position from a fantasy point of view. So I could understand that. But Jay Carraz is another one. Like, he's only 11% rostered, I think, is what I've got in front of me here. He's a bit higher priced at the moment, but he should leak a little bit. Had a couple of, he went 52 and 63 this week. So that, that's the thing with Jacob Carraz. When he's on that wing, man, and man, he just eats meters and eats work and throws an offload and breaks tackles. He's super consistent, Jacob Carraz. Hey, another one of the preseason darlings of yours there, Brien. So I'd be having a squiz at Carraz. He's been my best trade this year by a mile. I think I traded him in round 4 or 5, I think, way back when. And
I think I traded
he's
him
been good
out
for me since
then,
then.
which was
Yeah.
betraying my pick. But I've stuck strong
Mm.
to Zeus, so that's the most important thing. I at least
That's
had faith in one of them, which is good. All right, guys, that is us all wrapped up for the week. If you like the pod, give us a review, recommend to a friend, all those things, please. Spread the word, helps get us in more people's ear holes. If you want more info like this, patreon.com/NRL Physio. James, I am going to go, like wallow, maybe sleep in the fetal position tonight. Just on the thought that Dave Fafita could have played Origin. I'm going to mention it again. I don't even care.
Yeah, it's a tough one to come to terms with. I'm going to have to do some psychological therapy to get some acceptance and commitment going on with this one. I think, Brien, it's a tough hill to swallow, as the saying goes.
All right, guys, enjoy the week and up the mighty, mighty Redcliffe Dolphins.